Swinomish Casino and Lodge is a full-on entertainment experience located on Highway 20 just east of Anacortes. This is Mike Gastineau at Swinomish Casino and Lodge. You'll enjoy 700 of the latest slot machines along with blackjack, craps, roulette, pai gow, and keno. And just a few steps from the beautiful casino, the Swinomish Lodge is the perfect Pacific Northwest getaway. The lodge features rooms with floor-to-ceiling windows that allow you to experience beautiful views of the Swinomish Channel, San Juan Islands, and Mount Baker. You can dine casually at Carver's Cafe, Manchu Walk, or Fat Burger, catch the game at the Swinomish Sports Bar and Grill, or take your experience to the next level and enjoy 13 Moons. I've lived in Washington for over 30 years, and I thought I'd seen it all. But the first time I walked into 13 Moons, I was floored by the spectacular natural beauty and stunning views of Padilla Bay. Add in a great meal highlighting the delicious flavors of the Pacific Northwest, and you've got a dining experience you'll be thinking about and talking about until you return. For golfers, Swinomish Golf Links is a scenic links-style 18-hole par 72 golf course nestled between Fidalgo Bay and Simlic Bay with towering Mount Baker as a backdrop. Come play and stay with us at Swinomish Casino and Lodge. Get more information at SwinomishCasinoandLodge.com. Gambling problem? Call 800-522-4700.
Truth Plus Media.
Welcome to another edition of Iconic Sonics. I'm Mike Gastineau. Our thanks to the Swinomish Casino and Lodge and also Dick's Drive-In Restaurants. And I'm surrounded today by Sonics and basketball royalty. We've been trying to track down Hersey Hawkins for a while, the 1988 Collegiate Player of the Year. As of last November, a member of the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame and one of the great Sonics of all time. And, of course, George Karl, who joins us today, the sixth winningest coach in NBA history and one of only 10 guys to have 1,000 wins or more. And George, good to see you again. How many of those wins were a result of Hawk? How many would you give him credit for out of those 1,000 that you had?
Well, I'll give him a couple hundred. I didn't have him that long, maybe 100, 150. You know, it's great when you win 55 and 60 all the time. You know,
it stacks up after a while. Hawk, good to see you again, and I appreciate you doing this. We're going to talk about your career after playing and the work you've done with the Blazers. But I wanted to start by taking you back to the summer of 1995, and you've just completed a season in Charlotte. You guys have won 50 games. You went to the playoffs. Maybe you're getting it together. Who knows? You've been an East Coast NBA guy in your career, and then all of a sudden you're getting traded to Seattle, about as far away from Charlotte as you could go. What are your memories of that, hearing about it, and what were your first thoughts? Were you sad at all to leave the situation in Charlotte? Were you excited about Seattle? What happened when you got traded?
Well, I think whenever you get traded, you're sad because, of course, you know, somebody's getting rid of you. They don't want you anymore. So you always have that, you know, look at. But you know, you're also excited because of the new opportunity. And the only thing that I really remember about it was I'm leaving great weather and I'm going out to Seattle. I've heard the weather is crappy. And every time, you know, being on the East Coast, we traveled to Seattle or Portland, it was raining. So you have that to look forward to. But, you know, as far as the team and the Sonics, you know, I was really excited about that because I was able to watch a lot of their games after our games on the East Coast when I would just go home, watch the Sonics, and, you know, I knew how great of a team they were.
A lot of big personalities on that team. Obviously, you knew who these guys were. Did you know anybody? Had you known George at all, or Gary, or Shawn, or Det? Any of the guys you were joining, did you have a relationship with any of those guys prior to getting to Seattle?
I knew none of them besides playing against them. That was my only contact with them.
Wow. So you're coming in cold into a team full of big personalities, maybe led by the biggest of the bunch in George. George, we talk about trades in hindsight, and it's always easy to pick them apart or do whatever. this was a pretty darn good one. I mean, you got Kendall Gill. He's not fitting in for whatever the reason. That's a story for another day. But you're trying to move a guy that everybody in the league knows is a little unhappy, and you end up getting Hersey Hawkins and David Wingate, kind of an underrated part of that club in terms of a great practice player and a great competitor, and a guy who helped you on the floor a little bit. What are your memories of when you heard about this deal?
I think everybody was really happy. I mean, Kendall, he's a kind of a loner individualist in a game that, we had big personalities, as you said, Gary, Shawn, Detlef, Sam, Nate. They all have different big personalities in different ways. And Kendall wanted to have a part of the spotlight, and I don't think he ever fit in. He never got comfortable. He never got connected. And then when we made the trade, I thought we got just as much offense, what we needed at that position. And Hawk, to me, was more of a rock, a solid player rather than a spectacular player. And we didn't need spectacular. We needed a fundamental rock that could balance out Gary and Shawn a little bit. And I thought Hawk and Nate and Sam were just perfect complements with the chemistry we had.
The Hawk, you're thought of as one of the great scorers, certainly in college basketball history, and you had a great scoring career in the NBA. But I know George has told me, and I think Nate said, that one of the things that they were really kind of pleasantly surprised by was how seriously you took defense and how good you were at defense. If people hear Hersey Hawkins, they think about a shooter first. But talk about how seriously you took defense and how you kind of, as a scorer, sometimes you got to overcome that bias. There are certainly scorers that came along. I mean, a guy I liked watching a lot was Reggie Miller, but Reggie wasn't all that interested in playing defense all the time. You were. What was that about? Where did that come from?
I think it was just pride in trying to be the best or most complete player that I can be, and that entailed, playing, on both ends of the floor just as hard, working on the defensive aspect of it, following the scouting reports as well as, trying to be an offensive threat. And, Seattle, just watching them, I knew that they were a defensive-minded team, and that a lot of their offense, sort of started with what they did on the defensive end. So, it was a challenge. It was a welcome challenge that I was willing to, do whatever I can to sacrifice my game to help this team win. And what a great, coaching staff and I guess teammates I had that welcomed me and that helped me, along with all the defensive schemes that George liked to run at that time.
You did have a few, and you had two guys out at the guard position that are always thought of as defensive. Well, I don't know if people think of Gary as defensive first, but they should, and certainly Nate. How did Hawk fit into that rotation? Because I know you and I have talked before, and you said, well, you were really happy with what Hawk brought at the defensive end of the floor, not necessarily comparatively speaking, but just in an overall way.
Well, Gary and Nate are a little more flamboyant because they're more into making steals, and they're scrambling and rambling all over the place, trying to create a little bit of pressure and chaos. As I said at the beginning, I think Hawk was more solid and fundamental. And, everybody, we know Gary was a great defender, but we always kind of wanted to protect Gary to play in the fourth quarter. And so I would say 75, 80% of the time, Hawk got assigned the best backcourt guy. And I know, that's how good he was. Because, with Gary, and, we had other guys, Nate, as you said, David Wingate was a good defender. I don't know when we got Greg Anthony along the way. He was a good defender. And ball pressure, Gary was probably better at ball pressure than Hawk was. But Hawk was probably more fundamental than Gary was.
Hawk, you talk about not knowing anybody. So what's it like? You come walking in, and we've used the phrase big personality a couple of times now. I mean, what's it like meeting Gary and meeting Nate and these guys? I mean, clearly they're going to welcome you. You're a new teammate, but Gary in particular, do you remember like meeting him for the first time and kind of getting to know him as a teammate? Because he was such an interesting and is such an interesting person.
Yeah, he is. But, I it's really hard for me to remember my first interaction with Gary. I think just basketball and teammates. You don't force anything, and all of it sort of just happens organically, and that's what happened. With the Sonics. I was myself. I think everybody else was their self. Um, we just went out and played basketball, and over time, we just got to know each other a lot better on the court. We got to know each other a lot better off the court, and became friends. But nothing was forced; it just happened naturally.
And George, this again with that team and the way you guys competed every night. Hawk's the only guy on that team that started all 82 games. Everybody else had to miss at least a game along the way or a couple of games. And that's really the ultimate, right? When guys, a team like the 96 Sonics, the way they're composed, when they see a guy who's ready to go every single night, there's no fitting in. As Hersey said, it was just all natural. He's there to compete every night.
Well, I think the big thing is Hawk is, I've used the word fundamental here. He's consistent. I know Hawk had a great scoring background, but I thought he was a guy that was going to get you 15 or more every night without many mistakes. He wasn't a volume shooter.
Right.
On our team, he had to live off of other guys on our team, and I thought he got really adjusted well to that. In the one game, it's Game 7. I thought he might have been our most valuable player against Utah in Game 7. By his toughness in the backcourt and just a totally tough-minded game against a very tough-minded team in Utah. And it's probably my favorite game I've ever coached in basketball was that game that got us to the NBA Finals.
Hawk, what are your memories of that Sunday afternoon in Seattle? You guys have been down in Utah a couple of nights earlier, and they just destroyed you in Game 6. And a lot of us who just observe and who are sitting on the sidelines going, oh, man, Utah's got all the momentum. And then George is right. It's just a classic game. What do you remember about that Game 7 and you guys prevailing?
Just the electricity in the building, just the preparation and getting ready for Game 7. And, of course, having it on your home court, there was no way we were going to lose that game on our home court in the Game 7. And, I've often told people that I think George was by far the best coach I've ever had at getting a team to rebound after a bad loss or a disappointing loss. He came in, he always had the right words to say, the right motivation to get everybody back on the same page. And even if it was just coming in and saying, hey, it's over, don't think about it anymore. And then there were times where he would, go a little crazy after a bad game and let everybody know exactly how he felt. So, but he just had that ability. And after that drumming in Game 6, he just gathered everybody back together and got everybody motivated on the same page and ready to go in that Game 7.
Which way was he after Game 6? Was he more angry or was he more practical? Like, okay, guys, come on, here's what we're going to do. And what was his attitude like in those 2 days?
Well, I think whenever you get beat by 40, I don't know. You probably go past anger. He was a lot more practical after that loss.
I mean, that was a Doug Moe loss. You just got to let that one go because, I mean, I've learned that as I got older that blowouts are easier to accept a little bit more than losing by a jump shot or a turnover. You turn it over in the last 2 minutes, or you ran a bad play in the last 30 seconds. I was worried. Don't get me wrong. I thought the momentum had swung on us. But my favorite thing in my career is Utah and Denver. People don't understand how many times we met each other. And the Stockton, Malone, Peyton, Kemp thing is unbelievable. I mean, you could do a documentary on just those 4 guys and how they went after each other for about 7 years at the time I was in Seattle.
I know we've got just a little short time with you, George. I want to ask you guys both about the Sacramento series that same year. We had Frank Bukowski on the show earlier in the year, and I talked to Frank about, the series is 1-1, and you're in Sacramento, and game 3 has become a dogfight. And it's like, my God, if Sacramento wins this, we're going to be looking at 3 consecutive years potentially as Seattle losing in the first round. And Brick had an interesting point because he and Hawk, George, had huge fourth quarters, big shots in that fourth quarter when you guys were down. And Brick said, I think it helped that Hawk and I hadn't been here for the last 2 years. We didn't know anything about those first round losses. What about that, George, about having guys like Hawk and Brick that were just key in that game that didn't have any of the history or the baggage?
I would have never thought about that, but it makes some sense. I mean, it was heavy. I mean, and it's still heavy. I think in Seattle, when we go back there, they still have those. Remember those 2 years when a guy named Michael Jordan wasn't playing,
Sure.
and we might have been the best team in basketball in some ways. But in the same sense, those 2 games in Sacramento, both of them were really close. And we were behind in the fourth quarter. I don't know how much, but it wasn't double digits, but it was
8.
I'm thinking 6 or 7 or 8. Yeah. And I remember Hawk making a 3 and then Brick hitting a 3. I think Perk got a 3 in the fourth quarter. I know how I felt after game 4 when we won the series, how freed up I was, how relaxed I became, how celebratory. I killed this monkey or this animal that was all over my back for 2 years.
Well, and then you guys come out, those 4 games against Houston. I think it was a champagne cork going out of a bottle. You guys relaxed and you took Houston apart in that series. Hawk, one last thing on Sacramento, and then we'll wrap up segment 1. You talk about electricity in a building. That's one of my favorite buildings of all time. I'm sure it wasn't fun to play in it, but that game 3 that night, those fans were wild. You guys had to beat the Kings, and you had to beat that crowd.
No, it definitely wasn't wild. I can remember being extremely nervous before that game because of the crowd noise and the guy behind the bench with the cowbell and that place was just nuts at that time. And unfortunately, me and Brick may not have been there in the past years, but we felt the pressure of going into Sacramento. But I can remember losing game 2 and being in the locker room after the game and George coming in and saying, hey, don't worry about it. We're going to go down to Sacramento, win 2 games, and then wait for the next team. And I was like, okay.
Easy enough. Mission accomplished. Guys, it's great seeing both of you. Hawk, we're going to keep talking to you. George, I know we got to cut you loose. So you look good. Glad to get a few minutes to talk to you, and thanks for joining us.
Love you, Hawk. Appreciate you, babe. When I get to Vegas, I'm going to get your number. I'm going to come get free dinner.
You got it.
Hey, man. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.
George Karl on his way to Las Vegas, and we'll have segment 2 of Iconic Sonics with Hersey Hawkins. We'll talk a little bit about Hawk's college career and other memories of the Sonics as Iconic Sonics continues. Iconic Sonics is proudly supported by Swinomish Casino and Lodge, and they're proud partners with Iconic Sonics. They're located on beautiful Padilla Bay, just north of Seattle. Casino, lodge, dining, entertainment, and more. Swinomish Casino and Lodge provides a perfect getaway for relaxation. A full-service entertainment destination, including a 98-room luxury lodge, multi-purpose event center, and casino, open daily from 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. with a great mix of slot machines and Las Vegas-style table games. And for the food connoisseur, check out the 13 Moons Dining Experience, one of the finest in the area, a beautiful restaurant with cuisine designed to enhance the flavors of the Northwest. Swinomish Casino and Lodge, check out the best casino in the area with the most outstanding customer service, offering a luxuriant, state-of-the-art experience while maintaining and upholding the cultural identity of the Swinomish tribe. Swinomish Casino and Lodge. Find out more at SwinomishCasinoandLodge.com. That's SwinomishCasinoandLodge.com. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-522-4700. Iconic Sonics is fed by Dick's Drive-In Restaurants. What can I tell you about Dick's food that you don't already know? Probably nothing. They're a Seattle legend for serving great burgers, great fries, great shakes. What I can tell you that you might not know is Dick's also has a cool t-shirt now that salutes the 95-96 NBA Finals Sonics team. Take a look at the Sonics t-shirts available through Dick's at Dick's Drive-Ins, their Twitter feed at Dick's Drive-Ins. You'll see the photos. You'll buy the shirt. You'll be happy. Thanks to Dick's Drive-In Restaurants for the support on Iconic Sonics. And our nonprofit sponsor on Iconic Sonics is the Run Freely Foundation, a 501c3 organization founded by our friend Kenny Main. It raises money to help financially support veterans who need limb salvage, medical care, and rehabilitation. Years ago, Kenny suffered a catastrophic ankle injury, and after years of pain, he found relief with treatment in 2017 that got him both walking and running again pain-free. With that discovery, Kenny wanted to help others in pain, and the Run Freely Foundation was born to help provide the care he received to those who cannot afford to cover its costs. You can find out more and get involved with this great organization at runfreely.org. The Run Freely Foundation, proud sponsor of Iconic Sonics. Iconic Sonics, we have cut George loose, so now we can get the real truth from Hersey. I appreciate you, just kind of playing along with us, but it's fun to spend some time with the coach. And, it's interesting, Hawk. I hadn't thought of it this way, but it's so obvious. When he describes you as a rock, you did join a team that was kind of crazy and nuts in a good way at times. And you did, you've always been just kind of a steady, as she goes kind of thing. You know what I mean? You did bring some steadiness to that club. Was that calculated at all? Or do we get back to what you said earlier? You just being yourself.
No, it definitely wasn't calculated. It was just me going out and being myself and playing my game the way I play it, and being in the locker room, hanging out with the guys. I'm always gonna be, myself. And like George said, there were some big personalities on that team, and my goal was just to go in there and just be solid. Like he said, show up every night, do my job, compliment Gary in the backcourt, be open on the perimeter when Shawn got double teamed, to knock down some threes, to take some pressure off him. I knew exactly what my role was. And every night I just went on and tried to do it.
You mentioned Shawn, and that was, I think, his best year. And he had a great career, but I think 96 was his best season. I used to take people who had maybe never seen a Sonics game or hadn't gone for a couple of years, and I'd say, just watch number 40, because he's going to do something tonight that you've never seen before, because he just did that night after night. Did you ever get caught watching him? Like, you're out on the floor going, man, I'm just going to get a bag of popcorn and watch this guy sometimes. He really was. Well, what do you think about him when you think back on Shawn and some of your memories as to how he played?
That's mesmerizing. And I agree with you 100% that you can be a fan or you can be a teammate. And some of the things he did on the court, I can remember just running back down court if he would make some fantastic offensive move and just shaking my head thinking, how the hell did he do that? Or only Shawn could pull off that kind of move. And I know there were other great players in the league at that time, but that year, and maybe for a couple of years, I really thought that behind Michael Jordan, he may have been the second best player in the league, and just dominating and demanding double teams. And, he was just spectacular.
You almost came to take him for granted, because when a guy gets into that kind of a role, he's like, okay, well, you're going to get a double out of him tonight. And you start maybe thinking that way. What about Gary on the other end of some of those great passes? We think of Gary, you think of a lot of things, but one of the fun things about Gary was he's one of the game's all-time great trash talkers. Did you ever find yourself laughing out there? Did you have to stifle a laugh sometimes when he'd say something to somebody? Because I know he had a wicked sense of humor and a really sharp tongue towards opponents.
That he did. But, the crazy thing about it is Gary, he was a trash talker, and, he would get going occasionally. But as an opponent, if you never talked to Gary and just played, he wouldn't say anything to you. He would just play his game and just, do what he had to do. But as soon as whoever said something to him, it was over. Because the rest of the game, it was on. And he was trash talking, and he was going to try to get into their head. And I got enjoyment out of it sometimes, just watching him and listening to him and watching him take other players out of their game with his trash talking, and how he was able to just get into their head.
Well, you'd see it sometime where you'd be sitting up in the stands and you couldn't hear what he was saying, but you could kind of hear his voice, wow, 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 kind of like Charlie Brown's teacher. You could hear, you knew it. And then you'd see 4 or 5 guys sitting around him just crack up. So you knew whatever he was saying was funny. But it, as you say, it had to be poked a little bit for it to come out. And I think it was an integral part of his game. I think when I think he played better when he was, put a little bit like Michael Jordan, he'd put a little chip on his shoulder, and the next thing you know, he's unstoppable.
I agree. When he got a little agitated or upset, his game would definitely go to another level. And of course, as an opponent, the opposing team, that's the last thing you want to see. The guy was already talented enough, but then when he went to another level, for some reason, he seemed like he would just get more energy. He would get everybody else more involved, and then it was on from there. And we knew when he got to that level that we had to raise our level of play, because he was all of a sudden he was bringing it.
You've been working for the Trailblazers for the past several years in their front office. You obviously have been close to the NBA game. Do you ever find yourself, wishing you had come along at this point in time in history, because you were a great shooter? And the Sonics were a team that took advantage of the three, and I think you guys averaged, all of you, about 4 a game. Well, in today's game, that'd be like 4 a quarter. I mean, do you find yourself looking at this game going, man, oh man, if my legs were 30 years younger, I'd be out there killing it right now?
Oh my gosh. I look at the stats sometime, well, of course, the games, and see that there's, I guess, no disregard, or there's no problem with putting up, if you wanted to put up 15 to 23s a night. And just to be out there and being able to play that freely, to put up threes, what a dream that would be. And it doesn't help with the money that they're making these days as well.
Right.
Shooters are paid pretty well these days. So I will have a few more zeros in my bank account if I was playing as well.
No doubt. And you know what? When we think of you, we think of one of the great college players of all time. With name and licensing, there might have been somebody in Peoria, Illinois, having you sell cars for him. If we go back there, now, be Hersey Hawkins hawking cars for somebody and making big cash. You grew up in Chicago, and you were completely overlooked, right, by power conferences. I mean, it's funny. You ended up at Bradley. You had a great career. You're the greatest player in that school's history. One of the greatest players in the conference's history. But did you keep that chip on your shoulder? Were you a little ticked off that nobody from the Big Ten made a run at you?
I was, especially, being Chicago Player of the Year, and typically, if you're Chicago Player of the Year, you're going to get, all kind of schools coming after you. And of course, and being in Chicago, where, that's Illinois and DePaul and, the Midwest, you got the Big Ten, and to have none of those schools pursue you, it was disappointing. And, but, luckily, my coach knew Dick Versace, who was at Bradley at that time. And that sort of happened as a fluke. Bradley, really, they weren't, excited about recruiting me. But my coach and Dick were friends, and we had a closed practice for Dick Versace at the time, so he can watch and see if I could play the guard position, because I played center in high school. And once he saw me in that practice play guard, then they decided that, okay, maybe he can play at the college level.
Is that what scared teams off, do you think, that you'd been a center in high school, but you were obviously going to have to switch with your size to the backcourt? Were you smaller? I mean, what was it, do you think, that made so many teams overlook you?
Yeah, I think that was primarily it. Being a 6'3" center and in high school, but there were taller guys on our team. We had in high school, we had 6'7", 6'8", but I could jump a little higher. I was better at scoring inside, so a lot of my points came from maybe inside the paint or maybe right outside the paint. Didn't shoot a lot of jumpers in high school, so I would imagine that scared off a lot of college programs.
1988 is an amazing year for Hersey Hawkins. You end up being the National Collegiate Player of the Year. You're named to the U.S. Olympic team. You're drafted into the NBA. And in February of that year, you guys played Detroit in a Missouri Valley Conference game. You scored 63 points. It's still like, I think, the 8th or 9th best scoring total in a college game in history. You had a remarkable night. Looking at the box score, it's unbelievable how hot you were. What are your memories of that night against Detroit?
It was just one of those nights. I think right from, the first couple of shots, I think as a player, you can feel as though, okay, this is going to be my night. The basket just seemed big. I was in a good rhythm. And, after that, the team just started to feed me more. But it's odd. The one thing that I really regret about that night is I stopped shooting. It got to a point where I thought I was shooting the ball too much, and I started passing a little, but I could have easily had 70 to 75 that night. And I just started looking for teammates. And, I don't regret a lot of my college games, but that's one I regret because, how many people get to score 70? And that's what I should have done. I should have went for it.
It's interesting because you were 21 of 28, and only 3 of those field goals were 3-pointers. I mean, you did damage mainly from not inside, but inside the 3-point line. You also had 11 rebounds, so you played an all-around game. But if you had it to do again, and you know what, maybe because it was kind of a blowout, if it had been a closer game, maybe you figure I got to take the ball every time and try and win this game. Maybe is that why you started passing a little? And clearly you started thinking, all right, I don't want to take every shot tonight. But since you're way ahead, maybe you want to get other guys involved. Was that part of it?
That could have been part of it, but 28 shots, that's a lot of shots to take in a college game. And then, not to count, the free throws. I think I may have gone to the line maybe 20 times, somewhere around up in there. So, even that doesn't count as shot attempts, but you're still, trying to shoot the ball. So, I just started feeling guilty that I wasn't getting my teammates as involved as I should have, especially a high scoring game where that, 2 or 3 of you are very capable of scoring, 20 plus. You want to get other guys involved.
Kevin Bradshaw of U.S. International in 1991 is the only guy ever to score 70 in a college game. He scored 72 in a Division I college game. Pistol Pete did 69, 66, and 64. So you're right. If you'd been a little more selfish that night, you'd be up there in the Kevin Bradshaw zone. You'd be over 70.
I know. Don't remind me.
It says a lot about you that you wanted to get your team involved too. And I mean, it's still, I was saying earlier, you're the 7th guy. Only 6 other guys scored more than 63 in a game. So it's pretty remarkable. It took a while, and I never understand why these things sometimes do take a while, but in the things you've achieved in your career, what did it mean last November when you're inducted into the National Collegiate Basketball Hall of Fame? You're one of the great scorers in college basketball history. We talked about this game against Detroit. You played on a Bradley team that, particularly senior year, was really good and had a heartbreaking loss to Auburn in the NCAA tournament. What was it like to finally get that call and to go in?
It was amazing. What an honor, to finally go in. But my first initial thought was I was going to tell them, what the hell took you so long? I mean, I've only been out for 30 years, What's the criteria for getting in this college Hall of Fame? But, but what an honor. And then, to go in, with other great players, but from such storied franchises and colleges, with David Greenwood from UCLA and Paul Pierce from Kansas, Jameson from North Carolina, Jim Jackson from Ohio State. These are some of the top franchises the top colleges in the country. And then, Hersey Hawkins from Bradley. So I think it just hopefully, other players coming up or even at smaller schools can realize that you don't have to go to one of those, top colleges to achieve greatness.
Back to 88 and congratulations on the Hall of Fame. Back to 88, the Olympics come along and you're part of a team coached by John Thompson. Did you get hurt during the game against the Soviet Union, or was it before that game? Because I know you didn't play in the game that they lost, right?
Right. Yeah, correct. I was hurt in the game before, and it may have been against China, I think. Not 100% sure, but I think it may have been them.
I remember thinking about that 88 team, and I know so much about putting a basketball roster together, but I remember thinking they put a lot of eggs in the Hawk basket. Like there was talk that, hey, they don't have enough scorers on this team. And then when you got hurt, there was really a concern, and Soviets beat you by 6, and that was the last time the college players played. It had to be a tough thing to sit and watch that. Years later, though, is the pride in being on that Olympic team, does it overcome the setback that you had?
Yeah, I think, of course, just the opportunity to represent the USA, there's not a better feeling than you get, putting that USA jersey on. Of course, college is great, NBA great, but when you're representing your country, that's another level. And yeah, I think about it now, and of course, I'm proud of the fact that I had the opportunity to do it. But Mike, I think a lot of people felt exactly like you did, and you would be amazed at how many times I've heard since then that when I got injured, people have said they knew we were going to lose when I went down because we didn't have enough shooting or enough scoring. And I won't say that that's good to hear. It's frustrating and it's disappointing to hear because you just, of course, the ultimate goal is to win the gold medal, and to come short of that it was heartbreaking.
Hawk, when do you remember realizing that you were pretty good at basketball? I mean, I'm assuming you grew up in Chicago. I'm assuming you started playing as a kid on the playgrounds. I don't know how old you were when you first, played in the game, but as you worked through it, were you into like junior high? Were you in elementary school? Was it high school? When did you realize, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this?
It was actually high school, my sophomore year of high school. And I can remember the conversation, not verbatim, but as a freshman, I made our high school team, which is Chicago Westinghouse, and we had a good tradition of turning out very good basketball players.
Right.
And as a freshman, I quit the team because we also had a tradition of going to school, we had practice before school every morning, and it was conditioning. So I had to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning to catch the bus to get to school by 6:30 to get dressed, and we would have conditioning from like 7 to 8 before we went to class. And as a freshman, I'm like, the heck with this. So I quit the team, and the head coach at the time, Frank Lolino, fast forward a year later, my sophomore year, he pulled me in his office and pretty much chewed me out on the fact that I was a good basketball player. And if I stuck to it and, just committed myself, that I had a chance to play college basketball and that I was at one of the best schools in the city. And that was the conversation that sort of motivated me. Okay, if he thinks I have the ability to go on to college and to get a free education, then, I better buckle down. And that really was the conversation that motivated me to take it more seriously.
And think about that. From that comes this run at Bradley, all the great scoring that we talked about, an Olympian, drafted as I think the 6th player overall into the NBA, a 14 or 15-year playing career, and now a post career that included a long stretch as an NBA executive. It's funny, isn't it? One conversation with one guy that triggered everything that happened next. Isn't that amazing?
That it is amazing. And, years after that, because Frank Lolino, he actually came to see me play when I was with the Sonics.
Hmm.
So, we remained friends, and we actually talked about that conversation about that day, because he had Mark McGuire before me, and Eddie Johnson and Skip Dillard. He had guys that go on to the NBA and play in great college programs. And, he just thought that I had the same ability, but I didn't see it in myself. And it took someone to see that to get me on the right path.
Let's get back to the Sonics a little bit. In '96, you guys end up against the Bulls. The Bulls were a nemesis for you your whole career, man. You kept running into them in Philadelphia early on.
You're right.
You played for them at the end when maybe you were on the downside of your playing days. I mean, of all things, your hometown team kept screwing you up a little bit. George says he should have put Gary on Michael early. Everybody says if Nate had been healthy, it might have been a different series. A lot of what ifs. That Bulls team was pretty good. What do you think when you look back on that series about anything you guys might have done different?
You know what? I don't know, because I guess we could sit back now and question a lot of the things that happened or the decisions. My personal opinion is I thought that the Bulls at that time, they were just more prepared for all of the hoopla and everything that comes along with playing in the NBA Finals, the media attention, the interviews. It's amazing, the media spotlight on you. And for me, it got a little nerve-wracking. I don't know how other players on our team felt, but I thought because the Bulls had been there several times, I think they handled it better than we did. And I think by the time we settled down and really got back to, hey, what we do as a team, we were down 3-0.
Right. And that's a tough hill to climb against anybody, let alone it's just impossible to conceive of Michael Jordan losing 4 consecutive games in an NBA Finals, which is the mountain you had to climb.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Especially, I think at the time they had the best record in the NBA, of course, 72 and 10. And of course, a healthy Nate definitely makes a difference in that series. If we're able to get the minutes that we, would typically get out of him, just his leadership, ability to guard different players, that would have made a huge difference. But would it have got us over the top? Who knows?
When you were playing alongside Nate, and everybody kind of has the same answer to this, but I like asking it anyway. Did you have an idea he could be a coach one day?
Oh, of course.
Right?
Yeah, I can remember just the many times that he gave me advice on, maybe when I was going through a slump, and being able to sit down and talk to him about, confidence and just going out and doing what I do. And there were many times at practice, he would pull me to the side and work on my ball handling. Just, show me things that, how to get the ball up the court better if I needed to. And just little things like that are invaluable that, it may have come natural to him and what he would do as a person. But, as a teammate, like, hey, that's pretty cool. That's pretty special for a guy like that to spend that extra time with you.
Well, and he's had such a remarkable run, and depending on how long he wants to keep doing it, he's moving up the all-time wins list as well. And it's funny, we had him on last year right after he was named the Atlanta coach. It's one of the things I did with him. I said, let's do hawk trivia. Let's see how much you know about hawks. And I started asking about birds, like the actual hawk itself. And as you can imagine, he's looking at his watch like, I got to get going here. And finally I said, okay, one more hawk question. I go, in 96 and 97 and 98, when Hersey Hawkins played in Seattle, Kevin and Marcus would be doing the games, and they had a phrase they'd use all the time when Hersey got hot. They wanted somebody to do something for the hawk. What was it? And Nate's like, I wasn't listening to Kevin and Marcus. I was on the floor. But I kept giving him hints. He finally got feed the hawk. Everybody used to say, feed the hawk when he gets hot, man. Make sure he gets the ball. And Nate got a kick out of that. You two and Gary, I mean, if you think of backcourt trios, you normally talk about duos. but backcourt trios within an NBA team, and you guys, George, loved to play small. It was a pretty special group. The three of you all brought. I mean, Nate was almost a hybrid of you and Gary. You had Gary over here yelling and screaming. You had Hawk over here just being nice and steady and a rock, and you kind of had Nate in the middle of the two of you. Is that a good assessment?
That is a great assessment. And, I look back and think about occasionally that, yeah, that by far was the best backcourt I've ever played with. Gary was terrific, and and we know that in a lot of ways, the way he competed every single night, and with Nate and his steadiness and his just calmness and I guess more of a coach on the floor,
Right.
sort of, just took us to another level. And then you had me just sitting there like I'm taking the advice and I'm playing off those two. They were so close and had played together for so long. They knew each other extremely well. And, I just get set back and was able to learn off them. And, it was interesting at one point. I can remember that George in his substitution patterns, there was a time, I don't know how long it lasted, but he was substitute me in for offense. And then he was substituting Nate back in for defense. And this went on for a while in the fourth quarter. And people would ask me about it, like, did it bother me? And I'm like, of course not. Nate's a better defensive player than I am. I'm not nuts. I know what I'm capable of doing, and this guy's better at it.
George was. I mean, the rotations and look, you guys are during that run. You're right at the top. You're an elite team. It's funny because people go, well, they didn't win a championship, and that's true, but that doesn't mean you weren't an elite team. And for about 3 years before you got there, and for the whole time you were here, I mean, this was one of the top teams in the league. That's hard to do, isn't it? You know better than most, being involved in the game your whole life. To stay good at the NBA for that long is a difficult thing to do.
Oh, it is. It's extremely difficult, of course, because when you become one of those elite teams, there's a target on your back, and everybody wants to play their best against you. And we under George, I think we averaged about 60 wins a year, and there aren't many teams or many franchises can say that they had that kind of run. It's unfortunate that we didn't win it all. Damn, Michael Jordan stopped it, but Scottie Pippen. But what a run and what a great time. And the city of Seattle, they just embraced us, and Key Arena was magic and loud every night, and just a lot of great memories.
What's the future hold for you, Hawk? I know you're kind of moving out of. You've been with the Blazers for a long time and a great run there. You're moving out of that job. It sounds like slowly but surely. What's the future hold for Hersey Hawkins?
The future holds just a lot of golf, possibly, and I don't know, possibly just doing what I want to do. I always said that I wanted to enjoy myself, before I was too old where I couldn't do what I wanted to do. So if I want to travel or if I want to play golf or whatever it was, I just want to be healthy enough to do things that I've always wanted to do. And I'm sort of getting to that point now.
It feels like it's been it has been a long time since I got to talk to you. I know the fans that they've been asking to get you on the show. People are going to be excited to see that you're doing so well. And it's fun reminiscing with you, Hawk. It was an amazing run that those teams had, and you were a big part of it. The city, I know the NBA hadn't had a reason to come up here for a while, and hopefully that's going to change. But the city still has a big spot in its heart for you, Hawk, and we look forward to maybe a day when something happens where you can come up here for an NBA game.
There's nothing more I would love better than that is for the city to get another NBA team and to be able to come back there and watch an NBA game. The most enjoyable time I've ever had playing in the NBA was right there in Seattle. Just the welcomeness and the embracing of the city, the fan support. There's really nothing negative I have to say about the fan support, and they deserve a team there. And hopefully one day, if it's Adam Silver or whoever it may be, that they'll realize that the NBA is missing out on a lot by not having a franchise in Seattle.
Well put, Hawk. Great to see you again, and thanks for doing this, man. We'll do it again. I appreciate getting to talk to you.
Mike, I appreciate you, and I'm glad we were finally able to work it out. And you know where I'm at now, and hopefully, if I'm not on the golf course, you can catch me.
Well, George says he wants a free meal. I'm right behind him there, so we'll all just come down to Vegas and take you around, let you pick up the check.
I got you too as well. Come on down.
Hersey Hawkins, our guest on Iconic Sonics, the Hawk, member of the 96 NBA Finals team. And our thanks to George for joining us in segment 1. And thanks to you for dialing us up as always. I'm Mike Gastineau. Go to iconicsonics.com for more podcast information. And we'll see you next time for another great episode of Iconic Sonics.